Before that, you can't really say that there was any kind of, seriously speaking, any kind of modern thinking in the Indian cinema. The reason why I say this, because if you look at Indian cinema, you have to actually, originally, whether it's silent or sound cinema, you have to go back because it started with the theater. And theater itself, urban theater, it moved from urban theater into the cinema. But the urban theater itself went back to classical sources of Indian theater way back in tradition. Now, when you look at that whole movement from there, you will find that when cinema came, cinema simply took over all the theatrical traditions and put them in film. In other words, it was film theater. And this film theater created a strange kind of a language which we today really call conventional Indian cinema. Because if you look at the mainstream Indian cinema, its origins are actually traditional. They are traditional. They are not, because a lot of people don't think there's anything, there's no background to, the mainstream Indian cinema. There is a background. But that background, of course, even for the people who are practitioners, don't quite realize that there is such a background. And that background really goes back to the very principle of aesthetics in our tradition. And that, of course, the aesthetics in our tradition, very simply, goes to the idea that you have to have a combination of 9 essences of emotions, going back to the Natyashastra. And unless you have that kind of balance of all of that, you cannot create any kind of serious entertainment, something that would entertain everybody. And largely, it is actually true, because we react like that. The manner in which we function, we react like that in India, which is one of the reasons I believe that we never really created genres in India. We did not create a genre like you have in Western cinema. And we were creating films that had to offer different kinds of emotional situations in which you involved your audience. And all of that had to come together. It had to culminate, and certainly around 1 or 2 specific emotions. Most usually they were either love or valor, one of those two, because you'll find most stories are built around either love or valor. And the entire traditional form of Indian filmmaking was that. But what didn't happen in all of this was that modernity was only in terms of the technology which created the cinema. But the technology itself brought its own kind of language, which was simply ignored. For a very long period of time. Now, this is where I think when you look at Satyajit Ray, you find that you have somebody who suddenly sees, you see the logic of the art. That cinema is the creation of technology. Without technology, there would be no cinema. And when you have a situation like that, it also brings with it a certain kind of its own language, a certain kind of vocabulary that comes with that in that particular process. And that vocabulary has to be actually grappled with and understood and dealt with and used. Now, our early filmmakers were not really doing that. They were really putting what they put in the theater straight directly into the cinema. And in that process, we had never come into the experience of what really was modern. So the movement towards modernity had not seriously taken place. With Ray, the entire thing, suddenly you could see that this is a modern filmmaker who not only recognizes the kind of language that this technology allows you to use and how well it can be used. And he did it in a fashion that nobody else had done before him. And which is why I always think of Indian cinema as before Ray and after Ray. Because he is the watershed moment as far as Indian cinema is concerned, because after him, the idea of the medium being a modern one, and that the fact is that you cannot deal with the cinema if you do not understand the technology of it in the first place.